The Power of Self-Belief, A Writer's Journey. Rachel Matthews stood before the packed auditorium, her heart thundering against her ribs. 500 pairs of eyes looked up at her expectantly, waiting for her to begin her keynote speech at the National Writers' Conference. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just 3 years ago, she could barely muster the courage to show her writing to her own sister. As she adjusted the microphone, her fingers brushed against the small silver pendant she always wore, a gift from her grandmother, engraved with the words, "Write your truth." The cool metal against her skin centered her, as it had so many times before. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. 10 years ago, I was the girl who apologized for existing. Growing up in the shadow of excellence had been Rachel's first lesson in feeling invisible. Her older sister, Catherine, was the valedictorian who went on to become a renowned surgeon. Her younger brother, Michael, was the athletic prodigy who won state championships and earned a full scholarship to Stanford. And then there was Rachel, the middle child who was nice but never exceptional, who got good grades but never outstanding ones, who participated in activities but never stood out. The Matthews family dinner table had been a weekly reminder of her perceived inadequacy. While her siblings shared stories of achievements and accolades, Rachel would push her food around her plate, trying to make herself smaller. Her parents, both successful attorneys, never explicitly compared their children, but their proud smiles and excited discussions about Catherine's and Michael's accomplishments spoke volumes about their expectations. "Rachel's finding her way," her mother would say at family gatherings, with a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The phrase became a sword that cut deeper each time she heard it, a constant reminder that she hadn't yet found whatever mysterious quality would make her worthy of real pride. Her childhood bedroom told the story of living in the margins. While her siblings' rooms were adorned with trophies, medals, and certificates, Rachel's walls were bare except for a single bookshelf stuffed with worn paperbacks, her true friends and escape. It was between those pages that she first discovered her love for words, though she never dared to call herself a writer. Writers were special people who had important things to say. She was just Rachel, scribbling in journals she kept hidden under her mattress. The pattern followed her into adulthood. After college, while Catherine was saving lives in the operating room and Michael was making headlines in Silicon Valley, Rachel took a safe job as an administrative assistant at a publishing house. The irony of spending her days processing other people's stories while burying her own wasn't lost on her, but it felt fitting somehow, like watching life from behind a pane of glass. Her small apartment became her sanctuary, a place where she could finally breathe without feeling the weight of comparison. Every evening, after work, she would curl up in her favorite armchair, a shabby, comfortable piece she'd rescued from a thrift store, and lose herself in her journal. The pages became her confidants, holding secrets and dreams she dared not speak aloud. The turning point came on her 30th birthday, though it didn't feel like one at the time. She'd spent the evening alone, having begged off the family dinner with claims of a migraine. In reality, she couldn't bear another celebration where her siblings' latest achievements would overshadow her existence. Instead, she sat on her fire escape with her journal, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. That night, she wrote until her hand cramped, pouring out 30 years of buried pain, fear, and longing. As the sun rose over the city skyline, she read back what she'd written and felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she saw her own voice clearly on the page, raw, honest, and uniquely hers. With trembling fingers, she created a blog that morning. She called it Invisible Girl's Guide to Being Seen, though she couldn't bring herself to attach her name to it. Her first post was titled To All the Girls Who Apologize for Existing, a letter to her younger self that she never intended anyone to read. But people did read it. Within days, comments began appearing. "Are you inside my head? I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Your words gave me permission to exist." Each comment was a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around herself. Her anonymous readers became her first taste of belonging, a community of souls who understood what it meant to feel perpetually insufficient. She began posting regularly, raw, honest pieces about living in the shadows, about the quiet pain of being not enough, about the exhaustion of constantly measuring yourself against impossible standards. The blog grew slowly but steadily. Rachel found herself looking forward to her evenings, no longer just escaping into other people's stories, but creating her own. Her writing evolved from pure pain to something more nuanced, exploring the complexity of family dynamics, the nature of self-worth, the journey toward authenticity. 6 months into her blogging journey, she received an email that changed everything. It was from a literary agent who had discovered her blog. "Your voice is extraordinary. Have you ever considered writing a novel? I believe there are so many people who need to hear your story." Rachel's first instinct was to delete the email. A novel? Her? But before she could hit the delete button, a new comment appeared on her latest blog post. "Your words saved my life today. I've been feeling so alone, so invisible. Reading your blog made me feel seen for the first time." That comment became her North Star. Whenever self-doubt crept in during the writing process, she would return to it, reminding herself that her words mattered to someone. The novel poured out of her over the next year. She wrote early in the mornings before work, late at night after work, and every weekend. Her protagonist, Lucy, embodied every girl who had ever felt invisible, every person who had lived in someone else's shadow. But unlike Rachel's past self, Lucy learned to step into her own light. The hardest part wasn't the writing. It was deciding to put her real name on the manuscript. After hours of agonizing, she remembered her grandmother's words from years ago. "The truth doesn't hide, Rachel. It stands in its own light." When the novel was accepted for publication, Rachel finally told her family about her writing. Their reactions were unexpected. Catherine cried after reading the manuscript, apologizing for never seeing her sister's pain. Michael admitted he had always envied her ability to find beauty in words. And her parents, for the first time, seemed to see her, really see her. Finding My Light was published on Tuesday in spring. By Wednesday, it had hit the online bestseller lists. By Thursday, Rachel's inbox was flooded with messages from readers who saw themselves in her words. Media outlets began calling, wanting to interview the debut author whose novel about an invisible girl was making very visible waves. The success was beyond anything she had imagined, but the real transformation had happened long before the book hit the shelves. It had happened in countless late nights writing blog posts, in every moment she chose to be honest instead of hiding, in each time she hit publish, despite her fear. Standing now before the audience at the writers' conference, Rachel touched her grandmother's pendant again and smiled. "We all have a light inside us," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Sometimes it takes years to believe it's there. Sometimes we need others to reflect it back to us before we can see it ourselves. But it never goes out, even when we think we're invisible." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. In the front row, she saw a young woman furiously taking notes, reminiscent of herself not so long ago. "Your story matters," Rachel said, speaking directly to her. "Your voice matters. And most importantly, you matter. Not because of what you achieve, not because of how you compare to others, but simply because you exist." After the speech, as Rachel signed copies of her now best-selling second novel, the young woman from the front row approached her table. Her hands were shaking as she held out her book. "I've been keeping my writing secret," she whispered. "I'm afraid it's not good enough." Rachel looked up at her, seeing her own past self in the young woman's uncertain eyes. She took out a fresh journal from her bag. She always kept few with her now, for moments like this, and wrote on the first page, "Your words have power. Your story matters. Start here." As she watched the young woman clutch the journal to her chest and walk away, Rachel felt the familiar warmth of knowing another light was about to shine. Her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine about their upcoming family dinner, and for the first time in her life, she felt no anxiety about it. Tonight, she would share the news about her book being optioned for a film, and she would celebrate not just her success, but her journey to it. That evening, before heading to dinner, Rachel stood before her mirror, no longer seeing the invisible girl, but the woman who had learned to believe in her own light. On her desk lay the outline for her third novel, and beside it, a stack of letters from readers whose lives had been touched by her words. She picked up her grandmother's pendant, now worn smooth from years of anxious touching, and read the familiar words once more. Write your truth. And she smiled, knowing that her truth had become a light for others finding their way out of invisibility. As she left her apartment, she passed a young girl sitting on the stoop, writing in a journal. Rachel paused, remembering countless moments spent just like that, thinking her words didn't matter. She pulled out one of her business cards, now printed with the words author, speaker, light finder, and handed it to the girl. Keep writing, she said softly. The world needs your story. The girl looked up, surprise and recognition crossing her face. You're Rachel Matthews. I just finished your book. I didn't know you lived here. Rachel sat down beside her. Want to know secret? Every great story starts exactly like this. One person, one pen, one moment of courage to put words on a page. As the sun set over the city, Rachel saw her own journey reflected in the girl's hopeful eyes. She had come full circle, from the one who needed permission to exist to the one who helped others find their voice. And in that moment, she knew that this was her true success. Not the bestseller lists or speaking engagements, but the ability to show others that their light was worth believing in. She was no longer the girl who apologized for existing. She was the woman who helped others stop apologizing and start shining.